and I passed out in the car that was rushing me to the hospital. But when I did talk to the doctor, and my poor mom, she was an RN, she met me at the hospital, and she was like lost it, and she was frantic. And I tried to tell the doctor, what had happened, and he shamed me, and he said, "What drugs have you taken?" I said, "Listen, I don't do drugs. This is what happened." And he was pretty unkind.
Well, there's two types of doctors. There's doctors out there that really feel that people do go and have a near-death experience, and they do go into whatever, okay, towards heaven. And then in a lot of cases, some of them come back. And they, some of these patients actually remember what they were on the operating table. They remember what the doctors were talking about, just before they died. And when they came back, the doctor, I don't believe it. Well, hey, you were talking about your golfing and all this stuff. And it made him think. But, hey, James, you're out there. R.W., how many times did R.W. die?
6 times. And that's a lot. I mean,
and he had 6 near-death experiences, or death experiences, actually, because he was clinically dead those 6 times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad. I can't believe that I wasn't more injured, and that I lived through it. I wasn't as, I was injured, but I could have been catastrophic.
It could be. Now, James, you have some questions for her?
Yeah, Laura. Did the source say something to you? Do you remember the source that you call the source say anything to you at all?
No. When I entered it, I realized this was the final destination, that I was floating in a sea of love. I was a point of consciousness, and it was fabulously beautiful. And I've never felt so loved, like everything was corrected in me. Mm-hmm. I felt that, and I wanted for nothing, and I felt everything had been corrected in me.
So how did you come to the realization that it wasn't your time, or they had to send you back? Did somebody there say something to you, or did you have a thought in your head that, hey, what happened there?
Well, just before I returned, my grandfather and I were standing in this dimension, this ring outside of physical reality. It was less dense, and it was very mauve, a very beautiful, bright mauve. And I couldn't tell if there was any a floor we were standing on. There was no, it just him and me. And he was explaining that I had to come back, and I was distressed. I didn't want to leave, and of course, not seeing him for so many years, I was just kind of desperate to not lose that connection with him, but I was quite sad when I returned.
Mm-hmm. And did you feel yourself going back into your body? I mean, was that a trauma? Like, what was that like?
Unpleasant. It didn't feel good. It's sort of, how when you pull a cork out of a wine bottle? Well, just imagine that in reverse. That's what it felt like a slam dunk back into my body, So
when you came in, you had when you came back in, you had the reality of all the pain that went with your accident, I would assume, correct? And then you had to deal with that. And then the doctors kind of insulted you or whatever. Was there ever a time when you looked down on your body where you could see your body?
No. I didn't. That didn't happen with me, and I didn't have a religious epiphany either.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well,
but I did feel, one thing I can say about this that I think that would bring comfort. I think there's tremendous healing when you pass out of physical reality, when your physical body dies. I think there's recovery and healing that happens to you. Let's say if you were, very distressed or mentally ill or a very vexed personality, I think that eventually gets, I felt like all was corrected in me.
So you look at life totally different, I imagine, from before that compared to now, I would imagine, correct?
Oh, gosh, yes. And I'm 60 years old now. I can say that. That's okay. It's an achievement in itself. But
she's a kid.
I was a 19-year-old kid who was, trying to launch her modeling career, was worried about her clothes and her love life and her boyfriend and, all that dumb stuff, that crap that happens when you're, a teenager trying to be an adult. And when I came back, there was a real... my goals and my values had changed. I was much less materialistic. It really stuck with me. Like, we all want to be in a nice, cozy house, and you can't be poor and happy. But if you're middle class, you can be pretty darn happy. I didn't crave the material things that perhaps a lot of young people do. I never did after that.
Wow. Did you, when you came back, did you notice you had some other, say, abilities where you could sense things more, or was you more in tune to touch and smell and anything like that? Different?
Well, what the after effects of my near-death experience, I had a hard time handling. It took me a few years before I came to terms with it, and it didn't happen right away. Before, there was nothing psychic about me before my accident. I like to watch a good horror movie and a good ghost story, but, interest in the paranormal was, and politics too, were about zero. So after this happened, it wasn't right away, but I started to, after a friend was killed in an accident, I saw him, and I had a very sweet aunt that died, and she came to see me. And then the next day, I had to call up my sister and say, who died in the family? I had some, things like that happen that I had a hard time coming to terms with them. But when I hit my mid-20s, this had been more of a routine thing. So little by little, the fear dissipated. And they really hadn't been scary events, except my perception in the beginning was scary.
Interesting. Now, have you had other spirits that you didn't know come to you afterwards?
Yes.
And did any of those scare you, or how'd that go?
Well, not too well. I didn't say I was a champ at this. Would you like to hear about a fella that a stranger that connected with me?
Sure.
Yeah. I think that would be interesting.
Well, I was living down in Ormond Beach, Florida, and I had rented a little house near the beach on Halifax Drive. And one day I had to go to the Division of Motor Vehicles, like we all do. And, back then I was in my 20s, and I had, bad taste in clothing, and so I was kind of a little haughty, full of herself. And I go into the Division of Motor Vehicles, and there is this strange-looking man. I mean, bizarre-looking, like a creepy guy. And he was looking at me real funny, and he didn't seem to be interacting with anybody else. So, I kind of, kept to myself and got my, I guess, tag for my car or something, and then, went home. I didn't think about it. Well, about 2 or 3 in the morning, I was in bed, and I lived alone with, my 2 dogs and stuff. I was a waitress. So I'm asleep, and I heard somebody whistling. And I thought, gosh, did I leave the TV on in the living room? Well, I heard somebody whistling, and then he walked into my bedroom, and it was the same man, except he'd lost there was no pigmentation. He was totally white. I knew he wasn't alive. I thought, oh, my God, did he astral project? What is this? What's going on? And he was very menacing and not nice. And he came in, and I don't know what I said, but I don't think it was something I can repeat on the radio. And then he dissolved. I realized when I went, thinking back, going to when I saw him in the DMV, I don't think that he was alive then either.
No, it sounds like he followed you home.
Followed me to my house.
Yeah, I would say he followed you home, and he kind of looked menacing, so that had to be quite the experience. So what did you do that from that point on to try to keep that from ever happening again?
Well, I moved. I moved that like 3 days later. I was that shaken up. I was that, because that's the first, kind of bad experience I'd had. I'd seen, loved ones or people after they died, had come to me occasionally. This fellow, didn't have good Christian, pure thoughts towards me. So I moved and never saw him again.
That was a good thing. So yeah, that's the thing I've noticed with people, that sometimes when they come back from these things, they attract spirits. And the only thing with that is you could get any kind of spirit. That's why I was curious. Now, have you ever had other occurrences where you've had spirits in your bedroom that you didn't know?
Yes, but I don't think anything was menacing or anybody, or anything like that. I had a paranormal investigation team come to the house, and it was Raymond Mitchell and his crew here in Lexington, Kentucky, and I had a beautiful farm in the country with my horses, about 10 years ago. And I told him, I said, I have a lot of orb activity in my house. And he said, well, he came out to debunk me and set up his equipment and turn on the these infrared cameras, and there was orbs you could see. When I started talking and asking for some contact, I got what I asked for, and it was such good, clear pictures in different rooms. And when I'd leave the room, they would stop, and then I'd go in another room, and it would start up again. And the evidence was so strong, we sent it to the TV show My Ghost Story, and I was their guest on the show with my paranormal evidence.
Wow. Is that what got you into the paranormal in writing?
Well, I had all these experiences, and I want to explain something. When I had my near-death experience, I told a couple family members, and that was it. I didn't want to be labeled as a wackadoo or one of these, like ghost chasers, and I didn't read about it. I kind of kept it private. I didn't talk about it for 30 years to anybody, other than a few family members. That was it, and that's a long time to be quiet. But in 1987, when I was broke, living with a friend, I'd left my husband. I was absolutely lost in the world because my marriage was over. I had a dream, a very vivid dream, and I dreamt about this story. And I thought, well, I'm not an author. And I got encouragement, from a couple of friends, because I used to work in television and, other writers and stuff. I told them the premise for the story. They said, you ought to write it. Well, I didn't get around to writing it till I was 40 years old, and then the stories just tumbled out. I've had all these paranormal experiences, and I just put them in the books, and I did one book, and then the second, and then the third, and I thought, well, I guess I am an author after all. But I couldn't make this stuff up. I used real paranormal experiences to, incorporate it into my novels. So that was my outlet. Then I was told by an industry person when I tried to get an agent, wow, gosh, you're 50 years old. You haven't written anything before. So I decided that I'd be candid and had some paranormal investigation teams out and, did some radio shows, wrote some articles, and it just took off.
Well, it sounds like it. Now, we're going to have to go on break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. And then I want to get into, like, your books, some of the strange paranormal other experiences you had. So, I'm going to mute you so don't hang up. We'll be back in 3 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with Gary.
Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show.